r/AskReddit. When has a gut feeling saved your life? I almost got kidnapped once. I was like 23 or so. I was walking down my street at a little after dusk. I saw a van approaching a little ahead, no lights on. Didn't think much of it due to the time of day. The van slowed down and almost started creeping, as I was approaching this part of the sidewalk which had a tall solid wall fence to a community. This gave me some pause in that quick moment. For me to keep walking, I'd have to go between the wall and the van. In the little time it took me to take a couple of steps, and as the van was getting close, I noticed that the side door was slowly sliding open. The one thought in my mind was, why isn't the light turning on inside the van? When you open the door of a vehicle, the light should come on inside it. Unless you deliberately switch that off. And I just ran to the median. I ran in front of the van and across the street. Because if they're gonna have some use of roadkill me, have at it. But they're not getting me in one glorious piece. Immediately, the van took off like someone lit it on fire. From a slow crawl to full speed. As I looked after it to see the plates, I noticed it had no plates. And still no lights. I called the police, of course. They sent cars out and didn't find the van. I never had anything like this happen again, and I'm just an ordinary person, so I don't suspect it was targeted. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was driving a friend home late at night when I was around 21. She lived in a pretty rural area outside of St. Louis, Missouri, and about a quarter mile from her house was an old abandoned farm and farmhouse. I always thought of this place as non-threatening, as she told me she and her two sisters would go there as kids and they found an attic full of cool things, including a trunk of vintage woman's clothing and old love letters. Like something out of a movie. Anyway, I'm driving her home and it's a hot, humid Missouri summer and we have the windows open as the late night had offered some cool air. We are also singing at the top of our lungs. We pass the abandoned farm and I drop her off at her house. I wait long enough to see she makes it inside and I head back out the way I came. I'm driving along and I get to almost where the farm is and I see two things in the road. My danger meter goes off as I had just driven this road and there was nothing there. I put the windows up and make sure the doors are locked. I get closer and I realize the items are two car batteries, spaced out in the road, which was basically a one-lane road, in a way that I would have to get out and move them to drive on the road. I immediately knew I wasn't getting out of the car, so I picked the side of the road that had the lesser ditch and I gunned it. I was driving a little SUV and remember feeling the car run over branches and things in the little ditch, but I just gunned it and got out of there. All the way home I felt creeped out and kept checking my rearview mirror. I called my friend the next morning and told her what had happened and we both agreed it was weird. Shortly after that I moved to another state and didn't think much of it after that. Fast forward to 2 to 3 years later when I was back visiting my hometown. I randomly ran into my old friend and she ran up to me with wide eyes and grabbed my arms. She asked me if I remembered what I told her that night. I said yes, and she proceeded to tell me that not too long after that had happened her family was awakened in the middle of the night to someone pounding on their sliding glass door. Her dad went to check and saw two naked, injured women and let them in and called 911. They had been abducted from St. Louis City about 40 minutes away, by two men and brought to the old, abandoned farmhouse where the men tortured and upped them. The women somehow managed to get free and ran to the only light they could see, the light over my friend's garage. They survived, but the men were never caught. There was evidence the men had been going there for a while. My friend was convinced they had put the batteries in the road to lure me out of the car. I'm just really glad my gut told me not to. When I was around 18, I was on a back road with some friends and a girl I didn't know was driving really fast. Now, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I have always enjoyed a calculated risk in the name of a good time, but on this occasion I told her to either slow the fuck down or let me out. I literally had to start screaming at her before she listened and slowed down. A week later she crashed on that same stretch of road at 90 miles per hour, killing her, and the 3 passengers of her car. Always hated the dad scout leader in my area growing up. Just seemed like a real creep. Hated seeing him at community events, soccer games, back to school nights, etc. 10-year-old me staged a hissy fit to end all meltdowns with me slamming doors, crying and breaking shit to avoid being moved from Cub Scouts, where the moms ran things, to avoid Boy Scouts. Turns out the scout leader was molesting 3 or 4 of the boys in the troop and threatening to kill them if they ever spoke. Justice found him and he's in prison. My now wife and I did the long distance thing in college, and I planned on doing my normal routine to visit her, leave Chicago and in the morning, get to her early afternoon on Friday. Well, I'm closing my store on Thursday night, and get a feeling I should leave that night. So I said F it and left that night. A little after lunch on Friday, tornado sirens go off. I don't think anything of it until I head back home Sunday, and drive through a town about half-hour north of her. It got lit up by the tornado. I quickly realized that I had left at my normal time. I would have been smack dab in the middle of tornado. Few years ago I was at a bar with a couple of friends. All was good, we were drinking and having fun. All of a sudden, we heard this discussion taking place just a couple of tables from us. 2 guys decided to have a shouting/threat match. I stopped everything to pay attention to them. My friends were making fun of me, saying I was gossipy. One of the guys in the discussion got up and left. Immediately after he left, I told my friends we had to go. Now. Let's GTFO now. They didn't get why I was like that, but I'm their friend since forever. They reluctantly agreed. We went to a different bar in a different neighborhood, but I couldn't take my mind off of those 2 guys. The next day, the news were talking about a bar fight. Apparently the guy who got up went home, grabbed a gun and came back for a drive-by. Killed 4 people in the process. My grandpa taught me to never ignore my gut, and I couldn't be happier to have listened. I'm a bouncer. Came across a shady individual who had a gun on his person. Asked him to leave the weapon outside in his vehicle. Made a huge stink about it, but left it in his car. For some reason, I still felt like it wasn't enough. So I watched him closely all night. He got trashed, and then towards closing he decided to get in an argument with some Australian guys. They were all talking about taking the fight outside. One Australian guy already had his shirt off. I asked them to at least take it outside, but I followed closely. Once outside, the guy bent over to tie his shoe, and I realized he had an ankle holster for a second weapon. As he was pulling the gun out, I rushed him and we fought over the gun. The gun went off and hit a lady in her leg. Finally wrestled the gun out and put him in cuffs with the help of other security. True, a lady got hit that night. But I have a feeling if I hadn't been watching the guy closer, somebody in the Australian group would have died. Weirdest part about the story is the lady who got hit in the leg didn't stick around for the police. She ran off after getting hit. Might have had a warrant or something, but it didn't seem like a life-threatening shot. Drunk people are weird. I was driving across the country last summer, and was behind a guy, and something just didn't feel right. He wasn't doing anything crazy, but the way he was driving just felt off. Slowing down randomly and then speeding up a lot to compensate, wobbling around his lane, occasionally grazing the shoulder, etc. 2-lane highway. So, I'm torn about passing him because A, what if he cuts me off or something while I'm doing it, and B, I don't know if I want him behind me, but also I don't want to be anywhere near him, and passing him and speeding off seems like an okay option. So I see an exit sign and decide I'll just wait it out until then, get gas and hopefully never see him again. Dude then swerves into the left lane and then into the grass median, across the opposing side of the highway, and off into a field. Dude is still driving through this field as I'm passing. No idea what that was about, but he probably would have run into me as I passed him. Edit, I did stop and call 911, I have no further info though. I was at the county fair when I was younger, like 8 or 9. I wandered off from my parents and I had an odd feeling that I was being watched, but I ignored that for some reason. This man had followed me up and down the walkways of the expo hall we were standing in. As he started to get closer, I got this overwhelming feeling of fright. I called for my dad and I could tell it startled him. He promptly turned and changed direction from me. A really quick thing, but it's stuck with me all these years.